Right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Cabinet. Particular welcome to all of those who are giving up their time to watch us on the webcast, either now or in the future. Very special welcome to you all. We are now moved, as you will notice, into the council chamber. I'll come to that in a minute, why we've moved, but just so you should be aware, as we're not in the normal place, if you hear the fire alarm, evacuate the building, and the fire exit is located over there where it says fire exit, or out those other two doors down there, I think, as well, and meet in Memorial Park. We've already noted that the meeting is being webcast. There are no apologies for absence. Declarations of interest. Councillor John Wardner.
Thank you, Leader. Just a new non-pecuniary interest in relation to 11.1 Treasury Management due to my employment.
Thank you very much. And of course, all members of the Manydown Executive Committee will be leaving us when we get to item 14 on the agenda, on the housing requirement, because of the conflict of interest as landowners there. So we will give you time to leave at that particular point. I have no notification whatsoever, nor do I see any members of the public, and certainly there's been no notification from councillors, so it's just us. The minutes of the last meeting. Any corrections, changes to the minutes of the last meeting, or are you all happy with those? Agreed? Agreed. Right, I'll sign those later on when we finish. Urgent items, there are none. Referrals for full council, there are none. References and reports from other committees, there are none. And petitions, there are none. I was just going to, before we get to the of substance on this evening's agenda, just to make a small comment on the reason why we've moved, and the reason for those who are watching on the webcast why we've moved is because the room where the Cabinet meeting is normally held is currently the operations centre, responding to the floods that we have had within the borough. And I do think it is appropriate at this point in time to give a tremendous vote of thanks to all of our staff who have been working absolutely tirelessly, 24 hours round the clock, to do the best that they can to help out those of our residents who find themselves in very unfortunate circumstances, and some of them have really suffered badly because of the flooding, with their homes being damaged, some, I'm afraid, having damage occurring without being covered by insurance. We've tried to provide as much help as we possibly can. We have been aided in doing that tremendously by our partners, by the fire service, by housing associations, by one water authority, and by not necessarily by all of the water authorities, which I'm already on record over, and whose performance I think was absolutely shameful and remains so. By the armed services, who it was very good to see, and I have to say that some of the relatives, some of the residents did rather enjoy being picked up and carried out of their homes by very big firemen or very big, tough, strong soldiers or sailors. So there was at least some minor benefit to all of that. So we've had really good, and I mustn't forget as well the police, and the way that they responded in bringing up the chief inspector at home on his day off, on a Sunday evening, and getting an immediate response from him and getting people out there straight away. So I think everybody really has mucked in tremendously well, and the residents, I believe, actually as well, have shown tremendous resilience in the face of all this turmoil, and we wish them as well as it possibly can. Clearly the operation is continuing because we still have flood water in Buckskin. We still have a risk of flooding in St Marybourne, and floods are still, I think, in the Candovers as well, are still present there. It hasn't gone away yet, and then we have to move on to the cleaning up operation, which will again be something that we have to take very seriously. And I think there will also be the opportunity for reflection so that we can learn as many lessons as we can from doing it, so that if this happens again, we can do it even better the next time. But I think congratulations are due to everybody who's been involved in doing it. And thank you all for that effort. Right, enough of that from me. Let's move on to item 11, the Treasury and Management Strategy. Councillor Isaac.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, this report sets out the Treasury Management Policy and Strategy statements for 2014-15, and it's a policy that's been very carefully considered over a lengthy period of time, some 18 months. The reason we're looking to revise the policy is that the revenues that we're currently generating are below from our money in the markets, are below what we need as a council in terms of income, and this is in the context of interest rates having settled for 4 years now at historically low levels of 0.5%. So the revised investment treasury management strategy is based on advice from Arling Close and KPMG, and has been considered by ARGA. The principal change is that we're recommending here is to use diversified credit funds for up to £30 million of our funds, equivalent to about 10% of our funds in the money markets. The updated forecast for the average interest income is that it will increase to 3.8 million from 3.4 million, but we have a target of 4 million, which is showing an average return of 2.6% on our funds. This compares to a forecast revenue of only 2.8 million if we do nothing. Therefore, the projected increase is equivalent to somewhere in the order of 20% of council tax. So I'm recommending this policy change to Cabinet, and over to you.
I'd like to recommend to Cabinet
Please.
few
Excuse me, Councillor, have you got your microphone on for the record? Not working.
There we are then. I'd like to recommend to Cabinet that the review of the conservation areas be conducted in the form that's suggested, with the staged approach and methodology that's suggested. And this has been discussed at the Planning and Infrastructure Overview and Scrutiny Committee. And I'll respond to anything any other Cabinet member wants to say, but I think it speaks for itself.
Thank you. Other Cabinet members who wish to say something? Councillor Golding.
Okay, I wish to make a point in relation to Appendix 3, which is on page 61 or 121. It's the management plan consultation and adoption methodology, and I hope the portfolio holder will be able to accept my point without us needing to formally amend the decision notice. Item 3 of the consultation procedure talks about consultation with ward members and town councillors. It should include parish councillors in areas that have a parish. It also suggests that they will only be given 2 weeks to respond. That's an impractical time limit for town and parish councils who need time to meet and respond. So I hope the portfolio holder will assure me that we will include parish councillors and we will allow them enough time to meet and respond. Thank you.
I agree with both of those, and I will address both of those with the leading officer.
Thank you, Leader. I wonder if the Cabinet member might be able to clarify on page 62 of 121 in regards to the Basingstoke Town review, whether or not the Town Centre project manager and any other relevant officers might be also consulted as part of the engagement for this review.
Once again, I agree with that, and I will take that up with the relevant leading officer.
Thank you. I think you might as well add a sentence in the bottom saying, and I'll consult with anybody I need to for as long as I need to, and you've probably covered everything. But we'll do as it is with those two, and I would endorse that request for parish councils to be given adequate time. They do a tremendously good job, but they don't necessarily have the time to be able to do it within the time frame that we would work to. So it's important that's left. On that note, we're happy that we should proceed with that.
Agreed.
Good. Thank you. Then we move to the next item, which I think, if I remember correctly, is the Economic Master Plan, which is comes under the Economic Portfolio, which is therefore me. This master plan is really bringing together a number of strands of work that are being carried out across the council, looking at various aspects of the way that we want to see the borough develop for the future. It revolves around ensuring that we will have a good flow of jobs to meet the increasing population that we will see in the future, and jobs that are available locally for those people who will live locally, so that we do not have either vast estates of people with no work to go to, or roads clogged up with people trying to get out of the borough so they can go and work somewhere else. It is important that we maintain a vibrant economy within the borough if we are going to maintain all the other services that we provide, if we're going to maintain all the other facilities that we want to offer people to make the place a really good place to live. That is the key to it. That does not happen by just a gradual process of evolution. It only happens in a very competitive world as we're in. If we make a tremendous effort, we have a clear vision of where we want to go, we have the ambition to go there, and to achieve the right level of growth that's appropriate to the level of housing that we will provide and to the level of facilities that we have. It is very important when it comes to dealing with government and accessing the necessary funding to bring about the improvements in the infrastructure, local infrastructure that we want to see, that the government can see that we have a very clear plan that delivers value, and delivers value in terms of value added for the community in Basingstoke and Deane, but also for the region at large, and indeed for the overall economy of the country. And they have always made it very clear, and I think this will be the case whichever government one was dealing with, or whatever colour, that this has to be a deal. It has to be a two-way deal. They, if they're going to give money to an area, want to see that they're going to get something back. This plan brings together all the various elements of what we can provide, what we should be providing, and lays out the route map for how we would be able to give the government what it would want to see for the future. It has been very widely consulted on, widely consulted within and without of the council, particularly with the business community, but with almost every other person we could think of finding to consult with it on. Everybody, I think, without exception, has been supportive. And that applies also to when it went through committee, where they were also equally supportive, cross-party support, which I thought was very encouraging, and is also very important, because if we're looking to leverage in outside money, they want to know that there will be consistency and continuity in our approach, and that we wouldn't be doing a flick-flack backwards and forwards and changing our minds all the time. That is the very clear message, is that will not be the case. Therefore, I have a great deal of pleasure. A lot of good work has gone into this. I particularly will commend the officer who did most of it. I think she's done a tremendously good work on this. I hope you will feel your way to endorse it. Councillor Goldie.
I want to make one point at 3 places in the report, the first of which is on page 87 to 121. The draft plan refers to the future of Manydown and says that the whole site has the potential to provide up to 8,000 homes over a 30 to 40-year period. I think it's important to put on the record that those are not agreed numbers by this council. They're anticipating a discussion that is yet to be held. The last time we had a democratic public discussion of the matter, it was on the basis of the so-called Tibbalds report, which said 6,000 houses over 30 to 50 years. So I want to put down a marker that we're not here deciding that that's the right future for Manydown. Nobody yet knows where you put 8,000 houses. Nobody knows how quickly you could build them. Nobody knows whether you could deliver the necessary infrastructure. That is all yet to be discussed. But I do recognise the importance of having this master plan. I recognise the importance of emphasising the many attractions of Basingstoke and the wider borough, and so I shall vote for it. But I did want on the record that we're not deciding those numbers at this point. We're just recognising that that's somebody's best guess as they think it at the moment.
Councillor Riser.
I wanted to congratulate those involved in putting together this report. I think it's a very important piece of work. I think the borough's got huge potential, but it is contending with a lot of misconceptions which deter external investment, public and private sector. So it's very important that we have a plan. It's very important that we set out our stall and we market ourselves in a competitive environment. So I think this is a very necessary and important step along that road. So I'd like to state how pleased I am to see that this has emerged, and will have my full support.
Thank you. Councillor Donnell.
Thank you, Leader. Echo the points by Councillor Isaac, and just also say that Councillor Goulding beat me to the button by about 10 seconds. I'd like to echo his points and also put it on record the reservations around the number, and that we are not deciding anything. I wouldn't say it's someone's best choice, I'd say it's someone's guess.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think the point on Manydown is well made. The phrase that's actually used, it says, has the potential to accommodate. That does not, therefore it is by definition not the fact that it is going to accommodate it. And quite frankly, if it's in the next period, if it falls in between the 30 and the 40 years of the, well, at least the last 10 of those 30 to 40 years, I certainly won't be around to either remonstrate with people that they got the timing wrong or they got the number wrong. I think any figures that we are quoting that far out must by definition be just figures at this particular stage, and nobody, I think, would want to be tied down to that. It is very difficult when you bring together so many different strands which are actually being prepared at different times of trying to get them all together, and it's virtually impossible to do it. But I do believe that the general thrust is very clear and is well laid down. Okay, on that point, then we're agreed. We're happy with that. Fine. Thank you very much. We are now asking those members of the Manydown Executive Committee to leave the room, please, which then leaves a very small but perfectly formed group who will deal with the next item. The next item, which is something which is to which there is a referral or a reference within the economic master plan, which is the housing number. And this I shall hand over to Councillor Raffel.
Thank you, Leader. I'd like to recommend to Cabinet that we agree to continue with an annual housing requirement of 748 dwellings per annum, so that that number can inform the draft local plan, and that we agree that 748 dwellings per annum is used as the annual housing requirement for use in determining the borough's 5-year land supply position. It would be useful, partly because I haven't spoken on this yet in this round of consultation and decision making, and partly because it is important that we explain in public our reasons for coming to the conclusion that 748 is the appropriate figure, that I set out my views and the basis of my recommendation to the Cabinet. And I've set that out actually in the paper, but I should say that I have taken account of the views that were expressed at the Planning and Infrastructure Overview and Scrutiny Committee, in the sense that they felt that the current slight upturn in the economy was not a reliable long-term indicator for a change in headship rates. And of course, just as a slight downturn in the economy would also not be a reliable long-term indicator of headship rates. And I've also taken account of something which wasn't said then, but has been said by virtually every sensible economic commentator since, including the current governor of the Bank of England, that it is just too early to say that we are in a period of sustained economic recovery. I've taken account of the views that perhaps the methodology for calculating a slightly higher figure than 748 didn't make sense. And I've taken account of the factors which we all know to be true, namely that the borough has historically had high house prices, which have made it increasingly difficult for young people to get on the housing ladder. That trend of rising house prices is likely to continue due to the borough's popularity as a great place to live. As a consequence, the difficulty in forming new homes will act as an increasing downward pressure on headship rates. And it is my view, and I would say it is self-evident, that no increase in house building rates will drive the price downwards. It will only increase the trend of inward migration and the need for unaffordable infrastructure. Something which I say is self-evident because it's been proven by when we've had higher house building rates in the borough in previous years, that hasn't necessarily led to us delivering more affordable homes for the residents of this borough. It's just led to more people coming to this borough because they love living here, and it hasn't reduced the prices of housing as a consequence. Any current improvement in the economy has to be set against the effect on headship rates caused by the reluctance of lending institutions to finance mortgages, the risk of increasing interest rates as the economy recovers, private debt remaining high, and the ongoing effects on previous trends as a result of the reduction in housing benefit. And it's the cumulative effect of all of those things which, in my view, means that headship rates, they will act as a downward pressure on the formation of new households. All political parties, and I say all because there have been various pronouncements by various political parties in January of this year, have made it clear that they will commit themselves, should they form a government after the next election, to reducing government debt over the lifetime of the next parliament. And as a consequence, this will result in a severely constrained public spending rounds over many years into the future, making the provision of essential infrastructure difficult, even for the current figure of 748. I'm convinced that the borough has limitations on its ability to accept any higher growth in the population. And I say any higher growth than a figure of 748 would produce. And those problems are, firstly, and perhaps majorly so, the difficulties with water treatment and the impact on the River Loddon, and the transport infrastructure deficit, which we currently suffer from, which will not be overcome without further substantial capital investment. It seems to me that additional public finance for such investment is unlikely to be made available until at the earliest the second half of the plan period, thereby constraining future development. I agree with the comments made at the Planning Infrastructure Overview and Scrutiny Committee that the figure of 748 remained a robust evidence-based figure that should be recommended to Cabinet to be put forward in the plan. It's my view and my recommendation to Cabinet that the figure of 748 allows the Council to fulfil its objectives in achieving sufficient jobs growth in accordance with its economic strategy and sufficient affordable housing in accordance with its affordable housing strategy. I'm also convinced that the committee's view and my view, and I hope the Cabinet's view, represents the views of the residents of the borough, namely that the figure had to be high enough to provide sufficient homes for the borough's existing expanding population, whilst taking account of the natural desire of people from outside of the borough to live in the borough, as it is a great place to live and work. However, to set the figure higher would be more akin to wishful thinking than to a sound evidence-based approach due to the many constraints that exist. I've also taken account of the opinion poll conducted by the Gazette, which indicated that the public were totally opposed, almost completely to a person, of a figure of higher than 748 being proposed by this council. So that's my recommendation to you, Cabinet.
Thank you very much. Councillor Golding.
Thank you, Leader. I would like to put on record why I agree with the portfolio holder that we should go forward with a housing requirement of 748 dwellings per annum. To some extent, I may be repeating some of the things he said, but this is such an important and vital issue to the future of this borough that I think people should be listening to this webcast should be able to see that as Cabinet we've thought this through very carefully and reached a decision based on the evidence. First, as I have twice explained in detail at Planning and Infrastructure Ofcom, any increase in the number of people whose sewage goes to the Basingstoke sewage treatment works will lead to some increase in pollution of the River Loddon unless there is a major change in technology at the sewage treatment works. Under EU law, we are required to avoid a deterioration in band status for each element making up the Water Framework Directive classification. The water cycle study showed that building 945 dwellings per annum from April 2006 to March 2026, a total of 18,900 dwellings, would take us very close to a deterioration in band status for orthophosphates. The numbers of dwellings that have already been built since 2006 and the addition of 3 more years to the end of the plan period mean that 748 dwellings per annum over the period of this local plan would take us to more or less the same position as the water cycle study envisaged for 2026. Any increase in the housing requirement above 748 poses a very serious risk of a deterioration in the Water Framework Directive band status for orthophosphates, which is not permitted under EU law. There is no way that an inspector could ignore that at the examination in public, or that developers could argue that the benefits of development outweigh that breach of EU law. Second, the main element of the latest Edge Analytics work, which leads to the proposed increase from 748 to 807, is their analysis of headship rates. Broadly speaking, those rates determine the average number of people living in each dwelling, and hence the number of dwellings needed for a given population. Edge Analytics considered the headship rates calculated by the Department for Communities and Local Government based on the 2011 census and earlier data for 2008, which I understand was partly based on extrapolation from the 2001 census. When Cabinet agreed the requirement of 748 dwellings per annum at our meeting in June 2013, we were aware of both sets of CLG projections, as they were both mentioned in the original report by Edge Analytics. We chose the figure of 748 as it was based solely on the 2011 based rates, as they were the most up-to-date data, and we were advised at the time that this was the most robust approach. In their additional scenario analysis, Edge Analytics provide the results of a number of scenarios based on 2011 rates and the same scenarios based on 2008 rates. Then they also provide an average of the two results. In the report to Cabinet that we're now considering, officers say that using the average takes into data from a high point in the economy, 2008, and a low point in the economy, 2011, which is obviously true. However, I can see no logical basis for just taking the average of the two scenarios. We've not been presented with any evidence to show that the difference between 2008-based headship rates and 2011-based rates is due to the economic downturn. The difference may also be due, at least in part, to changes in society, which will continue despite the very welcome upturn in the economy. In particular, it seems likely that the changes to housing benefit for the under-35s will have had some impact on headship rates. So putting those two things together, I prefer to stick with 748, as it properly recognises the constraints imposed by the Water Framework Directive and is based on the latest available headship rates. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody? Councillor Dell.
Thank you, Leader. I'd first like to start by complimenting Councillor Fell on the amount of work he's done to bring us through, and his calm and logical analysis of the facts and the evidence that we've been presented with. I salute him for taking his own decision and recommending a decision in the face of all of the evidence and taking all of the evidence into account, and intend to support this. I would like to echo a few points that have been made already. I do have a concern that this amount of house building is still not sustainable for the borough, sustainable for the communities we live in, and indeed for our water resources or sewage resources. I think that is something we will have to consider going forward. The inspector will have to consider it, and we will certainly have to consider it as we move forward in the local plan process. I do believe that the evidence we have been given on headship rates will continue to expand, and I would look for the Cabinet member to keep under advisement, obviously going forward with the decision we're making today. The changes, as my colleague Councillor Golding mentioned, with regard to the welfare changes, and particularly the single occupancy for under 30s, which will have not flown into the figures for the 2011 census. They will obviously be impacting going forward from that date point. And I do believe this is something that needs to be consistently built into our figures going forward. However, having said those two caveats, I do believe we make the best decision that we can with the evidence that we have, but I do think that evidence will be continuing to go forward, and we will need to address some sustainability issues as we move forward. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. No, nobody else wishes to speak. And the one thing I think, just in summing up, is that one thing which is absolutely certain is that 748 is not the right number. But then it's a forecast, and no number is ever the right number. The question is it the best number that we can come to? And there I think it is the best number because it takes a purely statistical view of it, of where we are at the moment, and then tempers that with a large dose of realism about what is possible and what is likely to be the case going forward. And I think if we just purely rely on statistical data and don't allow ourselves to use our judgment, then we're actually undermining the whole principle of the way that we should be governing ourselves. We are, after all, sentient beings, and we shouldn't just be using the pure output of a computer to determine how we plan our future. So I think from that point of view, it is good that we take into account all these other aspects. Of course, all these other aspects can be changed at any time, but one has to have the confidence that the money will be there. Just saying, well, these can be changed, and therefore you can change the figure, without a very clear, almost certainty that the money will be available to make those changes, is just wishful thinking. It's trying to achieve random objectives that somebody somewhere has set without any very clear practical plan about how you're going to do it. And that is not proper planning. And therefore I hope when the inspector comes to look at that the inspector also recognises that there are other factors that need to be taken into account, not just the demographics in arriving at the number, and that he or she does put this into the overall context of where we will be finding ourselves over the next 20 years, or looks if we are. So on that basis, are we happy to adopt the figure as per the report? Not as per the decision notice?
Yes.
Good. Thank you all very much. Let me just check to make sure in case is anything else on the agenda, but I don't think we actually have any other decisions to note this evening, in which case this meeting is now terminated at, I make it about 7:05.